Lewis, you're looking remarkably well considering you jumped out of the Red Sea just a matter of days ago, and you've been obviously deeply ingrained in COP27 since then. How are things going out there in Egypt? We're on the last sort of day of COP27, and how are things?
Georgie, I feel like I have been looking after a set of 6-week-old twins. Okay, yeah, I'm really tired, and I think all the negotiators are really tired. They've been at it now for 2 weeks, and we're now down to the last 24 hours, and this is where the real crunch time occurs here.
What's COP27 like? What's it like walking in there as somebody of your stature, but also just as just from the perspective of what do you see when you walk through the door of COP? What is around you? What are you surrounded by?
You're surrounded by so many people. 35,000 people have come here to
Wow.
COP, and the noise. So
Hence why
it's
you're doing
quite,
this chat from your hotel room.
hence why I'm doing it. The noise is really, really overwhelming because a lot of people who are doing little small talks, and they've all got microphones, and everyone is just, it's really noisy, really loud, and it's very difficult to actually navigate your way around. So if I could describe it like this, in one corner you've got the SAS, in the other corner you've got some businessmen who are trying to sell some stuff, in the other corner you've got some nuns, and in another corner you have some some young university students. It is like that. So the reason why I'm giving that analogy is because you have some negotiators who are extremely experienced, have been doing this for many, many years, and are the SAS of negotiators. In the other corner, you have some people who really don't have a lot of experience, but are negotiating on behalf of their governments. Then you have some people who are like the paintballers. They're there, they enjoy the process, but they're not the negotiators. Then you have business people who are there trying to sell clean tech or financing, and then you have a lot of young people here. So people between the ages of 18 and 24 who are absolutely passionate. And you walk in and suddenly you've got all these people, and a lot of people come up to you and wanting to discuss things. And it's quite difficult to work out who in which group they are very, very quickly. So it's quite a confusing place.
How much of a difference do you think things like COP actually make?
I think they're very, very important. I don't know any other way in which we're going to solve this crisis. I mean, there are 196 odd nations in the world, and they've got to get together to discuss how to solve this. This cannot just be solved by a number of countries on their own. All of us have got to be involved. So when people complain about the COP system, my first question to them is, well, yes, I appreciate that the COP system can be improved, but what is the actual alternative now in this world?
You talked in our podcast, Performance People, just a couple of weeks ago about how important it is that world leaders start moving at the same pace, if not faster, than glaciers. Is that the sort of thing that can happen at COP27? Is the dial changing? Is it shifting?
Well, I mean, I think it's a fair statement to say that glaciers are now moving faster than our world leaders. And the reason why I say that was because I was in Ilulissat in Greenland last year, and that glacier. So I was swimming across the face of the Ilulissat glacier, and it is quite something to see the speed at which those icebergs are carving off that glacier. I'll
Mm.
never ever forget it. I saw this enormous carving incident where thousands and thousands and thousands of icebergs were literally pouring out to sea. And then I went to the COP negotiations last year, which were in Glasgow, and world leaders were making commitments for 2050, 2060, as if this was not happening. Uh,
Mm.
in Ilulissat, those glaciers now are moving at a speed of 40 meters per day in summer. And I want you to imagine that you're one of the youth here. So there is, as I mentioned, a big contingent of young people aged somewhere between 18 and 24. They were not around when these negotiations began. The negotiations have been going on for 28 years, and there's a frustration from the youth that things need to move much, much quicker.
As a result, I mean, with a positive emphasis on this, as a result of your Red Sea swim, something good has come out of that. Just tell us a little bit about this marine protected area that you've managed to achieve from that.
Yeah, well, I mean, just to put this in perspective, there were an awful lot of people who were working very, very hard here in Egypt and elsewhere to create this marine protected area. But I am absolutely delighted. As you know, I swam across the Red Sea. So I swam from Saudi Arabia to here to Sharm el Sheikh and then across to the other side, to the African side. And the coral is, it's just absolutely magnificent just to swim along there. And every time I take a stroke, I look up and there's arid desert. And then you put your head down and it is just life. And there are sharks and there are manta rays and there are turtles and fish of every single color and description. It's amazing here. But this coral is really under threat. And the science is very, very stark. The science is that if we continue to heat the planet, if we heat it over 2 degrees, 99% of coral will die. And we're currently on track, not for 2 degrees, but for 2.8 degrees centigrade. And so the Egyptian government have now announced the creation of this very, very long marine protected area. And they've called it the Great Fringing Reef Marine Protected Area. So it's along on the edge of all these reefs. And it's in extent, it's 2,000 kilometers long, which is long. I mean, just to put it in perspective, that's London to Athens or London to Gibraltar. It's a really, really long marine protected area. But my message to the world leaders is when it comes to these marine protected areas, you can protect an area as much as you want. We can protect the whole world and create an enormous national park on land and all the sea as marine protected areas. If we don't radically cut our emissions, then that coral will simply die. That's the science.
Yeah, one of the things that you've been really vocal on about on social media since your swim, and you were prior to that, of course, as well. And I know because you've been with us in Plymouth on the Sail GP boat, which has protect in great big letters across the sail. How fundamental are our oceans in all of this? Why do our oceans matter as much as you say they do?
A number of different reasons. First, they regulate our climate. Oceans provide the air which we breathe. They also absorb a significant amount of our carbon emissions. The oceans feed us. They provide jobs. They provide livelihoods. That's why they're important to humans. But I also like to concentrate on why oceans are important to our wildlife. And that is because the oceans are the home to all these magnificent animals, dolphins, whales, seals, penguins, all the wonderful wildlife that lives in our oceans. And I think there's something fundamentally wrong with us living in a way in which we're pushing these animals into extinction. So I talk a lot about both intergenerational justice. So that's, justice between ourselves and future generations. If we leave a world which is unsustainable to our children, there's something very, very wrong about that. That's not just. And also justice between species, so between us and the animal kingdom. We are not the only species here on Earth. And every single species has a right to live here on Earth and to thrive.
So we're sitting here on a Zoom call having this conversation, and I can't help but thinking there must be a ton of people out there that are thinking, why on earth is COP27 in person? Why isn't it just a giant Zoom call? I mean, we know that Greta Thunberg has been vocal about the fact she's not there and talked about the greenwashing element. What do you think about that? I mean, you're obviously there, so tell us what you think about that and your viewpoint on it.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think that she has got a point, and I think that Zoom has. I mean, it's revolutionized the world in a way which is incredible and reduced so much travel. And so I think it's been an amazing invention. However, this is what I'll say. I was involved in the negotiations between the Russians and the Americans to create a protected area around Antarctica. And those negotiations went on for 17 years. The real breakthrough occurred in the last 2 years, and I went to Moscow and I sat down with some of the leaders in the Russian government, and I remember those discussions very, very clearly. I think it's incredibly difficult to persuade, and I mean, I'm just using the Russians as an example, but the Russians, the Chinese, the Americans, the French. To have a negotiation, you need to have that connection. You need to look people straight in the face and build a rapport and work through all the different issues. I just simply don't believe that. And while I say that Zoom has huge benefits to be able to persuade these countries to really move, I think that would be naive.
So that's what's going on at the minute. Last 24 hours of COP, and they're all sat around that table, looking each other in the eye and trying to find an agreement. Is anything going to get agreed? And if so, what is it likely to be? And how tense are those last moments? And who's holding anyone accountable post the decision that gets made?
Yeah, I mean, lots of questions there.
Sorry.
It is the last 24 hours, but often these negotiations actually go on because they just haven't been able to cut the necessary deals. So these negotiators, and remember, these are from 196 nations in the world. They are working late into the night and sometimes don't agree everything. And so they carry on onto Saturday and sometimes onto Sunday. And that's the way it works. And people are incredibly tired, but concessions have to be made and red lines also have to be drawn. So these next 24 hours will be absolutely crucial. The big things which are being discussed are the climate finance, how we're going to actually finance tackling the climate crisis. And the other is what they call the emissions gap. So in Paris, we agreed we wouldn't heat the planet more than 1.5 degrees centigrade. Currently, we're on track for heating the planet by 2.8 degrees centigrade. So somehow countries, governments have got to agree how we're going to be able to reduce those emissions down to 1.5 degrees centigrade. So those are the two big things which are being discussed. And the other thing is what they call loss and damage. Who is going to pay for the loss and the damage that has been caused by the climate crisis? And obviously there are many nations here who are pointing fingers to the developed nations and saying, you caused it. You've got to pay for the damage because we are experiencing it now literally on a daily basis.
It'll be fascinating to see what comes out of the next weekend then also. And Lewis, thank you for catching up with us. I think you probably have deserved that well-earned rest after this. Go and have a lie down.
Thank you so much, Georgie. Thank you.